Yo, what's up? Back with another video. Hope you're well. In light of the videos that Katlego has been making about black people, and a more recent video being the one where she took the statistics as presented by Police Commissioner Mkhwanazi.
So these are the stats. This eThekwini district, they account for the biggest number of informal settlements that we have. The biggest number of liquor outlets. Biggest number of all the wrong things. Unemployment. Kids that are dropping out of school and they wander on the street and they commit crime. They are all within this eThekwini district. So we need to identify what the problem is and how then do we fix it going forward. Our perpetrators, Premier, we felt we must put this slide so that we can identify what is our problem. Because we need to analyze what is the problem. The problem we have, you forgive me on this, but this is not me talking, these are the stats. We have a problem with the black man in South Africa.
We have a problem with the black man in South Africa.
We have a serious problem. What we see here, we put the colors, the races of perpetrators that we've arrested. All the green, as you can see, almost everything is green here, which means almost everything is black that is committing crime. This eThekwini district, out of total of 60,000 cases, criminals that were arrested between the age of 16 and 25 years old. 16 and 25 years old. We arrested 60,000 criminals in this period of 5 years that we are counting. Out of this number, 57,691 of them were black men. This eThekwini district, out of 60,000, 57,000 of them are black men that we've arrested between the age of 16 and 25.
To bash and shame black people, to tie the black community, man, woman, child, together with criminals and the ANC, and then burn us all in one fire.
The biggest problems we have in South Africa are the black people.
Our perpetrators,
Black people.
criminals,
Black people.
perpetrators that we've arrested.
Black people. Is he also a coconut for saying that? I wonder.
That was some horrendous stuff. Nothing that I've ever seen before in South Africa. So I've been pursuing that matter. I've been pursuing to correct Katlego and to give her some racial sensitivity training, to let her be reminded that people have a right to dignity. Outright roasting of people and their culture, a complete kicking of their personhood, and trampling it like a cigarette on the street is something that the law already recognizes to be very wrong. And Katlego has ventured very far. This has been a sad experiment and I hope has come to an end. And we'll be pressing on to make sure that such never returns again. Ladies and gentlemen, before I read the letter, and I will be giving you a video at the end of this where Statistician General Pali Lehohla has a conversation with Imandra Petty regarding the National Development Plan being a failure, regarding the monopolies, white monopoly capital. We will see that it actually exists. And with his stats, we will get a clear understanding of the socioeconomic conditions that we find ourselves in, the conditions that make opportunities so few and makes the few very rich and the majority so poor. We'll have a presentation of how stats are actually presented and how these conditions lead to things like crime and black men in KZN being arrested at such high numbers. So I hope you stick around for that. So let's get into the letter. Dear Commissioner Mkhwanazi, I write to you on behalf of black South Africans who are deeply troubled by the recent misuse of your statements by certain online personalities, notably Katlego of Citizen Concerned and a young man who is on the come up doing the same kind of content who also quoted Mkhwanazi the same and denigrated black people the same.
A lot of what's going on in our communities today isn't just the result of past injustices. It's us.
We have a problem with the black man in South Africa. We have a serious problem.
A young man by the name of Sambit. Your remarks addressed during a solemn discussion on crime statistics and the socioeconomic challenges in specific areas were intended to shed light on the real issues affecting communities and the conditions that push young men towards criminality. It is clear to those of us who know your work that you are not seeking to demean or mock black communities, but rather to highlight the urgent need to address the structural problems that have long plagued our society. Unfortunately, your words have been extracted from their intended context and repurposed repurposed by these YouTubers to fuel divisive narratives. Their selective quoting has been used to suggest that black people in general are the root of our nation's challenges, thereby insulting the dignity of countless individuals and sowing further discord within our communities. This deliberate distortion not only harms the reputation of our people, but also undermines the constructive discourse needed to tackle the real issues at hand. We respectfully request that you issue a public clarification to reaffirm your original intent. A statement from you distancing your remarks from the malicious interpretations propagated by Katlego and the Sambit would go a long way in uniting our nation and countering the damage caused by these misrepresentations. Such a clarification would help restore trust among the public by making it clear that your message was solely about addressing the socioeconomic conditions that contribute to crime, not about casting aspersions on our communities. Your leadership is crucial in these turbulent times, and your clarification would not only set the record straight, but also reinforce the unity and resilience of our nation. We stand ready to support initiatives that foster honest dialogue and work toward practical solutions for the challenges facing South Africa today. Thank you for your attention to this matter. We trust that you will consider this request with seriousness it deserves and help us move forward as a more united and informed nation. Sincerely, Neo. On behalf of Black South Africans seeking truth, unity, and justice. Who still thinks that we're playing here on this channel? Who still thinks that we're here to mess around and argue with YouTubers? Huh? Who thinks that we're not sincerely defending our dignity here to live as black people and be respected in our nation? Huh? If you think I'm playing. Now let's listen to Pali Lehohla on Newsroom Africa with Imandra Petty. The video is titled National Development Plan, a Flop. Lehohla, if you want to go check it out yourself. Let's go. Listening to some statistics now, not this rubbish science, rubbish statistics, and rubbish approach used by Katlego and the Sambit. I will talk about that young man. We're getting to him just now.
For this next conversation, and we get more time with it, which is wonderful. The unemployment crisis, not that the subject is wonderful, but the unemployment crisis in South Africa is the #1 priority for economic policy in the new government, as it has been for government since 1994. What is less clear and highly contested is what should be done to solve the problem. So today in this special feature, we sit down with a man who knows the numbers well, but who will also give us fresh insights on how to answer this complex question, and that is the former Statistician General Dr. Pali Lehohla. Dr. Lehohla, thank you for your time this morning. Really, really do appreciate it. So we have this opportunity for
Thank
this
you very much.
longer and less rushed conversation, because I know you hate
I'll need 2 hours.
Listen, we negotiated at least 30 minutes, so we're lucky there. Okay, we've broken it up into 4 sections, so I want to work through them quite methodically. We sort of set the scene around the unemployment conundrum in South Africa. So let's start there with that unemployment problem. We have fewer people employed in South Africa in the age groups that count in 2024 as compared to 2008 in a growing population of young people. And the reason we're starting there is because that should be the engine room and the labor, the muscle that we can use to power our economy. So explain how you see it.
Well, you started by saying it's the #1 priority. Why has it remained stuck for 30 years is a priority? It means it's not a priority. The facts suggest that it is not a priority. Perhaps I could get, I've got a few slides. Slide number 3 will illustrate this more graphically. In 2008, and they can put that slide number 3 there. In 2008, there were 4.8 million people employed in the age group 25 to 34, 4.8 million. In 2008, there were 1.6 million people employed in the age group 15 to 24. Fast forward to the last quarter of this year, the third quarter of this year. So the third quarter of this year, the numbers are 4.7 million for those who are 25 to 34, and remain 1 million for those who are 15 to 16.
It's gone down.
So now, can you tell me that then youth is a priority in terms of employment? Or is employment a priority at all? is unemployment, dealing with unemployment, a priority? It is not. The evidence suggests otherwise.
Let me just pop in there, Dr. Lehohla. So we're asking our team to show our viewers that slide, which maps the decline over the last the last years since 2008. And again, debunking this idea then that if it had been a priority, we would have at least seen the number shift because the policy, the execution would have supported that goal of prioritization. So it suggests it has not.
Well, the priorities are bankrupt. Yeah. They are devoid of any evidence. They are devoid of any forward-looking process. They are devoid of foresight. Once your policy doesn't have foresight and doesn't have future proof, then it's not worth the paper it is written on. And this is what we are seeing now.
So, again, and we'll bring up those slides as and when we can. So we're trying to build this conversation to show our viewers just the statistical data that underpins, and we should be evidence-based in our responses.
Well, it's rhetoric. Everybody says we are evidence-based, we are numbers-based. We are not. Oh, the slide is up there.
Yeah.
So you can see for the lower part of the bars, or you want me to stand there? I can just...
No, you be seated. Yeah. You can just point, because that's what our viewers are seeing right now.
I see. All right. Yeah. So you see the lower bar here, the lower bars at 25 to 34 and 24 to 15 to 24. The numbers for those, that's where you had over 4.8 million in 2008. The one bar shows 2008, the other one shows 2024. So you are looking at 16 years later, you have fewer people employed in those bars compared to 2008 for those two groups. The only growth that has happened is for those who are 35 and above. So when a young person who is unemployed, you know, I keep rabbits.
Yeah.
When I have not fed them, they eat their young ones.
Wow. I didn't know that about rabbits.
They do. So are cats. So are South Africans.
Wow, that's a powerful statement.
That's as profound as this is. We have eaten the future of our children.
Dr. Lehohla, the next three pieces that we're talking about are meant to answer the complex question of how we change this outcome, right? So we're going to be talking about growing the informal sector, for example. We'll talk about buying black. We'll talk about the colonial and apartheid legacy around education. Should we move forward from those points?
Yes, I would like to debunk the myth that Harvard says about South Africa's informal sector being small as a share of employment relative to the African countries.
In fact, before you go into it, let me preface it a little bit, right? And I think we've got a slide on that as well,
yes,
around the informal settlement. So that's slide number one. So research agency, and you're going to talk about Harvard in a moment, but if you think about South Africa, Trade Intelligence, they estimated that the size of South Africa's fast-moving consumer goods category or retail market here in South Africa will be around 197 billion rand in 2023, 11.1 million people shopping in about 150,000 stores across the country. So the headline in Business Tech, I think that was last month, was that big business wants in on South Africa's booming 200 billion rand informal economy.
Pause, y'all. The title of this chart comparing South Africa with others is titled Included or Enslaved.
Is that a well-placed argument around the size of the informal sector in South Africa? What we generally understand, that it's small, it's not going anywhere. How do you see it?
Well, they've put it euphemistically. That, and they show... let me put the Harvard argument first.
Okay.
And then we'll come to this issue, which glorifies what big business is doing, which is going into the informal sector, small as it is. If you look at the graphs, the graph that they just removed on informal sector, if you can bring that graph again, because it compares the size of the informal sector of South Africa relative to that of the African continent. In South Africa, it is smaller. But the solution is not to increase the size of the informal sector. The key problem is concentration by monopoly capital. That's where it is. But Harvard wants to sketch that issue and blame it on the small size of the informal sector. There's no way you can grow an informal sector when you have concentration.
Ladies and gentlemen, what Pali Lehohla there is describing, where he says Harvard has done and published a study or a report themselves that misrepresents what the problem is, or they alter the results of the experiment and present it in a way that makes people look slightly 1 degree off of where they should be looking to see the problem. Just 1 degree off. This sounds like what Katlego kinda does. You'll start to realize that there are people who are smart enough to reach the correct conclusions about things. They are able to see the real numbers, but they'll present the numbers in a way that is awkward, in a way that is gross, in a way that is divisive, in a way that is crooked and self-interested. And so Harvard is engaged in the same regarding the condition of our economy, the informal sector, and the concentration and how much big capital is competing for even the smallest crumbs.
The concentration has been there for years, and you have vertical integration of the value chains. So to suggest that we can create informal sector to break those monopolies is very naive. In fact, Harvard cannot be naive in this thing.
Let me again ask my team to bring the graphic that we've just played. I think it's graphic number one.
Graphic number
back
one.
up onto our screen so that it can show illustratively what Dr. Lehohla is talking about. There it is again,
Yes.
Dr.
The
Lehohla.
first slide is that of South Africa. You can see the top bar, which is blue, is the longest. And then the yellow, which is basically the informal sector, is the smallest in South Africa. You can see those yellow bars following on the blue ones. The blue ones are your chain stores. In South Africa, they are the biggest.
You know what's interesting? Can I just add, because we're the most industrialized nation on the African continent.
Yes, indeed.
Yet we see our African counterparts have the informal sector larger than the formal sector.
Now, Harvard wants us to go to be like the African countries. The analysis is wrong. It's fundamentally flawed. Because through industrialization, you create a formal sector. Now they want to informalize as a solution. It can't be. The problem there is it's the size of the monopolies. It is that which is the concentration. And we have to deal with the concentration. And of course, that concentration that we talk about is the last point when we say buy African.
So we kind of need a solution where if we are to be like Cote d'Ivoire with a larger informal sector where the black people are just playing in the field, selling and providing the goods and services, that would mean increasing the yellow by pushing back the blue, which he says are the retail stores. They are the largest in South Africa. Very interesting. Very interesting if you are just a South African and you've never understood how large or small a role big retailers play in other nations, in other countries. Here, they've got us all covered, surrounded. They're right in front of us, the majority who have the need to consume food, clothing. That means that the yellow, where black people could be selling clothes themselves, there's no participation in that. It's the smallest yellow bar because Mr. Price is right here, Pep is right here, selling 3-piece baby sets for 20 bucks. They are a Timu already. You cannot compete with them. I think that's what I'm interpreting. If I'm wrong, criticize me in the comments.
That is how we will deal with these monopolies. But what you see there is the reality of the informal sector across the continent where South Africa has the smallest. Harvard says we must grow the informal sector. You can't grow it out of concentration. You can't grow it out of when we have gone past that stage. Those stages of development shows that you go up that ladder. In South Africa, unfortunately, it was accompanied by monopoly capital. That's the concentration.
Let's talk about monopoly capital in South Africa because it's become a swear word depending on who's saying it. There are also, different ideas around what monopoly capital represents in South Africa. So in order for us to have a balanced and equal conversation, we need to make sure that our meaning and our understanding of the term is aligned. What do you mean when you refer to monopoly capital?
Well, in a capitalist society, concentration of industrialization is in the hands of the few. And it increasingly becomes that way. And anybody that tries to rise is killed.
Ooh!
Remember the story of Pepsi and Coca-Cola in 1993, or was it 1994? Where Coca-Cola actually deprived Pepsi the bottles.
Woo!
And it couldn't bottle its Coke. And we call that free competition in the context of Milton Friedman, that we are all after profit. So capital always seeks ways of undermining competition at all times. It's not pro-competition, it wants to undermine it. And here in South Africa, it has been white and has been concentrated. And here in South Africa, it has been white and has been concentrated.
The biggest problems we have in South Africa are the black people.
And that's what you see from this data from the International Comparisons Program, Africa, where you see concentration. And it is vertical. The concentration is vertical. The value chains are vertical.
Is there a slide you have in mind that you want us to project?
That first slide, that shows that vertical concentration. So that's our structure of the economy. And what we are trying to deal with, the way we are trying to deal with that is to actually go around the, the drum instead of actually cracking through the drum. So have us.
Remember when I said if an interpretation, if results of an experiment are presented slightly off of the point that they actually make, and you say they make a point to the left, we are going around the drum instead of beating it at the center. Thank you.
Suggestion that we should increase the informal sector. It's in practical, it's not implementable because that concentration already exists. There is a path to deal with that kind of thing. And one of those things is when you look at your education, which we have paid very little attention to.
Let me preface the education question then, because it is a sore topic in the context of South Africa's both colonialism and apartheid. And I think in a lot of discussions we've been having recently is we can't simply...
Colonialism and apartheid, ladies and gentlemen, this is what Katlego will skip over. She's that kind of journalist. Please return sometimes to some mainstream, respectable journalism. It may not be completely accurate for many people's interpretations and point of views, but do not stick to YouTube. Do not start following somebody on Twitter as your news. Do not follow a certain tweet account because you may just be following a Satanist. Listen to how Imandra Petty is sending us through the subject matter, something that you don't see with the Ronaldo Hoses.
Is we can't simply measure history, from a particular point. We need a lot more context in order to understand where we are generationally now in South Africa. So you had the education legacy of colonialism and apartheid in South Africa. It stunted educational development and the education goals of several generations in South Africa. In 1954, then PM Hendrik Verwoerd said that it was a waste of time, for example, to teach mathematics to a black child. How did that type of education affect the fate of the black community in South Africa? And I know based on our pre-conversation that you also want to bring in the trajectory comparatively that the Indian community made in forging their own education destiny from the 1950s.
Indeed. I mean, if they could put up slide number 5, you will see that. What is very important here is to understand that there's no intergenerational value accruing to the colored and the black community. Absolutely none. And because of that, you can see the graph of whites going up, the graph of Afrikaners of Indians going up. You see the graph of blacks and colors going down. It shows that there's no intergenerational value accruing to these people. And that's why you cannot crack that monopoly capital, which is...
Intergenerational value, what does that term mean? Does it mean upward mobility? Does it mean one generation leaving wealth to the next? He says that the Afrikaners, whites, are going up, the Indians are also on a come up. And so the black people and the coloreds are getting poorer from generation to generation. If your parent was broke, you will be broker.
Which is white, actually.
And your children will be even broker than you.
Essentially white. The Indians were able to crack this in 1953 when Verwoerd said was the use of teaching Bantu child mathematics when it can't use it in practice. They were able to crack this. Why? Because they acted on it. They acted on the education. And you will see that the graph of the Indians from 1953 departed from their cohort of blacks and colors.
What do they do?
This is where a learning organization should do and search what is it that the Indians did. Because that is what is required, with probably modifications to be done by blacks and colors.
Ayo, Indians, please tell us in the comments what y'all did in the 1950s. Y'all seem to have separated from us and started going up the elevator, and we've been going down since. The hell is going on? Give us some recipe. We can see y'all driving BMWs and GTIs and Audis on these streets. Y'all Indians in South Africa are like the Mexicans in America. It's the people who have cars as a culture. You know, y'all celebrate cars. White people are over that, just vehicles. Some do celebrate, many do. But you being dark and similar to us in skin tone, y'all are the dark-skinned people with cars. The Mexicans are the light-skinned people with some cars as well, but separated quite a lot from the whites. Tell us, we want to buy some rides. We want to have some exhausts. We want to have 22-inch rims. We want to have nitrous oxide. You know, we want to have a paying job.
But the result of that, 70 years later, or rather 70 years later from 1953, is what you see in that graph of the Indians. I mean, if you look at this graph of the Indians here, you can see it is going up. For those who are 65 years, you can see that graph going up, departing from this graph of blacks, going up that way. And then the Indians and coloreds going that way. That's what we have to be understanding as South Africa. Rather than these policies that will follow this policy, that policy, which are not worth the ink written on that paper.
What you're suggesting, Dr. Lehohla, and thank you very much. I love, you could be an anchor any day because you've just mastered the ease of using the studio, so thank you for that. Is that when we see something that is dysfunctional, government ordained, not working to solve the problem it was created to work, we need something else. We need to go in a different direction. Given, well, the principle of that argument around what the Indian community did in taking education into their own hands, I'm making partly an assumption there, because as you say, some research needs to be attached to that. Given the sluggishness of this economy, the deficit of opportunity for young people, how do we take that into our own hands then?
Well, perhaps we should try slide number 7, because until we understand the meaning of slide number 7, there cannot be peace in this country. If you look at the inequality amongst the blacks, this is inequality amongst the blacks. It's the highest in the race groups. Of course, neoliberal policies say some level of inequality is important for development. There is nothing that justifies this kind of inequality for blacks. And what happens is those who are like myself, who have gotten some education, we are responsible for this inequality, and those who got BEEs, because a few of them got that and left the masses poor and hungry and cold. This level of inequality in South Africa, with this level of inequality, you cannot have peace. Well, particularly amongst one race group. This is the inequality amongst whites. These guys manage to drink their wine and whiskey without fighting over mkopoti. So this is the problem, and that problem is anchored in education, it's anchored in this neoliberal policies that we have followed. And this is not going to change.
Okay, so let me put it to you then, this particular...
Inequality among black people, that is meaning that if there is some increase, if there are some black people who are increasing with the Indians, it means that there are so few increasing, and when they increase, when they experience upward mobility, they jump so much that they pretty much join the ranks of the whites. And so now there's a thin layer of the very black rich, and by contrast to the poor, there is no such massive contrast. So no such massive bandwidth gap among the white people, if that's what I'm listening to. Means that the gap between whites and blacks is kinda proportionately similar to that of blacks and blacks, if I'm understanding properly. I'm just trying to move with this. You tell me what you're understanding.
Perspective. Black ownership of businesses in South Africa, I think this is 2022 is the last number that I've got, 30%. We are the most industrialized nation on the continent, we've said that already, but we can't command majority ownership. How is this possible when more than 500 triple BE deals worth more than 600 billion rand aim to facilitate the transfer of ownership to black people?
That's what has created that level of inequality amongst blacks. That is its effect. And now generating lack of peace amongst black people. It is too small. It is a pick and choose. It is not a national movement. It is not well designed. It is not well thought through. It doesn't have future proof.
So the few black people who are rising are causing more of the agitation, the class divide, where a black person can see another black person in a 5 million rand Mercedes. That causes more agitation in the black person than when they see that with a white person. The black people accept and understand that that's a white person. They should have that Jeep SRT. But you, black man, what have you done? Who did you get close to get this kind of car? I work hard like you. I want to get some of this money. And so black people start rioting and feeling that, no, I'm living my life on this earth and I'm not going anywhere. People like me are moving. My life is being wasted. I should be in a G-class. I should be sitting in front of an 85-inch TV. What has happened? Why didn't I get that education? A lot of people wonder, because some of you might be wanting to jump in the comments and say, well, that's that entitlement. You just want to look at a person and get what they have. That's jealousy. No, you're trash. Hey, hold up, dumb commenters. People, when they see what somebody has, they wonder what the person has done, and they wish to go start at the bottom and work their way up. It gets more and more sad as you get older and you realize that, oh man, going to university now with 3 kids to go and try to work that job that guy's working to get that car, you realize that you're like 15 years behind, because you're 35 and that person driving that G-Class over there is 20 years old.
Because if we future-proofed that, we would have seen that its effect will be that one. So when you don't have future designs, design thinking and systems design, go to government, go to the president's office and say, show me your planning system. He doesn't have it.
What does it look like? What should it look like?
A planning system should look like minus apartheid. You know, when a man by the name of Pali, I forget his surname, when we got into government in 1996, and I was at Statistician, I just joined from Botswana, where I headed the statistics office there for over 13 years. He said to me, you know, I have this system that Pig Butter was using to plan. I don't know where I should take this. Can Statistician inherit it? Marco had already said no, who was my head of office. I also said, you know, this thing belongs to planning. It doesn't belong here. It's that they say. We didn't have a credible planning system since that time. Of course, President Mbeki had this PICAS, Policy Coordination and Advisory Services, which was trying to recalibrate that from 2002. But when Mkhwanazi came in, he started this National Development Plan, and then the National Planning Ministry, whatever it was called.
And committee.
Then there was the other one, which was evaluation. And
Plan
then,
monitoring
and then there was
evaluation,
economic planning. That didn't fall under planning. So it was distribution of loyalties
Right.
instead of actually going into a systems-based thinking.
Yeah.
That's why the NDP has been a serious flop. I mean, nobody bothers about it. Just as the RDP, nobody still bothers about it.
And we've had several iterations of how to
Well,
move.
for that, let's be more dramatic about it.
He's got
And
the
go to
stats.
slide number,
He's got more slides.
sorry,
He's going in.
slide number 10.
I hope you are appreciating a presentation of
You can be very
stats.
dramatic about it. So, you see this road moving from the RDP.
Let's have you stand on the other side, Dr. Lehohla.
The RDP, GIA, NGP, or rather, as Giza NGP, NDP, the 9-point plan, the 14-point plan, which was part of the 9-point plan, now the ERRP, and then the district development model, and master plans.
We're good at plans, hey?
Not worth the paper they are written on.
Ooh.
So you don't get surprised when you get the results.
Right.
The results we are getting are the results we planned.
This again, and I really wish we do have the opportunity to do more on this conversation, because for me it is just, it's provoking so many other thoughts and lines of questioning that I want to engage in, and maybe we can set that up in the future, because if I'm enjoying it, I'm hoping that our audience is enjoying it. A big call, because this is the note we want to end on, the big moral call you're making, Dr. Lehohla, given all of this and the can-do-ness that South Africans must engage in now, is for black people to create our own wealth. You ask why we are withholding our money. You ask why we are looking for someone to save us. How, in your opinion, are we missing the opportunities to create wealth when the environment doesn't seem to be conducive for wealth creation?
How many minutes do you have? Because I think I need one more slide.
We can do. We'll give you 4 minutes
Let's
more.
go to 6. Slide 6.
He's got another
Because
slide.
Slide 6 is the most telling slide. You see, this particular slide tells a tale of what has happened since 1994 to 2016. I could reproduce this slide for 2024. You can see how this part of colors and blacks got stuck through time. You can see how that slide grew. You see, that's growth.
And who does that represent?
That's white. And this is India.
Right.
And Indians are catching up. And why are they catching up? Because they did something in 1953 when Verwoerd did what he did.
Hey, yo, tell us, Indians, please. We want to buy leather seats. Hey, we want 4 pipes.
Now you can see how these... So blacks are stuck, the gramophone.
Yeah.
And the
record.
the record, when it has a groove. This is what is happening to the colors and the blacks. This is the people that are skilled in the workforce. The proportion of the skilled in the workforce as a proportion of their own population group. It's stuck. When it's stuck like that, it cannot go forward. Absolutely not. And this is what has been the return for democracy. It was not only democratic dividend, it was also a demographic dividend. For blacks and colors, it's been disaster.
The graph at the bottom is titled The Man-Made Purgatory of Poverty and Neglect, a Catastrophic Accident. Purgatory, the middle ground between heaven and hell, no man's land, limbo, the gap between. So it seems the gap has been man-made since apartheid, since the whole extravaganza, freedom is coming tomorrow. The prisoner has been released and is going straight to being a president, something that had just happened in Ghana, I believe. So this was a rehearsal of some kind. Black people needed to see their liberation like the Ghanaians, if I remember properly. So it seemed like that was an event. It was a show. There were event planners and coordinators. The media was ready to give off a celebration of some kind. Democracy is here. But right after the party ended, New Year, crickets, fireworks have gone quiet. Happy The agenda just continued saying, hey, yo, whites, keep eating, y'all. Keep moving. Indians, y'all woke up some couple of years ago. Y'all know what the whites are doing. Do it. And we and the coloureds have been left out. And now there's a gap, that purgatory between us. A gap between those who are growing and those who are not.
So given that we're stuck in a rut, and I heard a profound saying many years ago, Dr. Lehohla, that the only difference between a groove and a grave is depth.
Absolutely.
And when we're stuck like that, that means we're dying. There's no growth, there's no development, we're not going anywhere. So take us back to the concept then of how we activate ourselves in this context.
We don't activate ourselves by having Katlego on our screens, celebrating white people for these conditions that are known and blasting the blacks. Because the blacks don't know they've been disadvantaged. They don't know that they've been left out of a secret recipe. And so Katlego is inviting those who are winning. Come, let's fly over the black people and urinate over them. Let's give them some rain for their dry skin.
Take us back to the concept then of how we activate ourselves in this context.
Well, there are a few things that have to be done. Our policies must have future-proof.
And future-proof is what?
Business, when it plans, it says, I'll make profit in year 2027. And then it goes to the market and says, here is the evidence of such happening. Now, in government, we don't have that future-proof. What they are hoping for after thumb-sucking is that growth will be better. I mean, if you think about Treasury saying that we'll grow by 1.1% this year, and the first quarter of the year was 0% growth, the second quarter was 0.3, the third quarter was minus 0.3.
Yo.
Sure.
So it's zero now.
Yeah.
Can you get 1.1% growth
No way.
in the last quarter? No way.
Oh, my Lord. I think the Indians are growing by 13%. I think that's the fastest growth that we are seeing across the world right now. I think the Germans are also starting to face an issue of growing by less than 5%. They're experiencing something like 3%. So the German economy is in trouble. The BMWs, the motor industry, the Chinese and the cars they've been making, the Germans are no longer the superpower when it comes to cars. I'm along with many other economic conditions, but just telling you what they are known for. The cars, that's one of the areas being hammered by the Chinese.
Can get that. So you need to model the future. And based on that modeling of the future, you've got to build scenarios. And those scenarios will tell you where you are going. In terms of the scenarios that we have built and quantified at Indulamete, clearly we said this country is going into Guaragwara. We have quantified those scenarios and we could show what set of policies were driving us into the Guaragwara scenario.
Just so that in Klamati, so they basically
yes.
they scenario forecast South African. I think the weaver bird and all of these birds.
Yes,
the one that the president quoted.
This is the review of those scenarios.
Right, exactly, and they encapsulate it in this bird metaphor.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
It really creates a good idea for where we will end up in South Africa. So I encourage our viewers to go and have a look at that. I've got to leave it there, but Dr. Lehohla, I just want to appreciate you coming in and sharing just these little nuggets of wisdom. I hope our viewers have enjoyed it. But what you are definitely suggesting is we've got to wake the heck up in South Africa, and we've got to ask better questions and hold the right people's feet to the fire.
Well, if we do that, we wouldn't have closed Komati, and everybody, including the president, regrets why we closed Komati and not holding him responsible.
What do you mean? What should have happened there?
We should hold the people that closed Komati responsible. Because everybody says we shouldn't have closed Komati as though it closed itself. And then we ran short of electricity. This is the kind of society we have become. Absolutely idiots. We have become.
Is that Komati Port power station or something? Is it closed?
We are backing at the moon instead of holding those who have to be held to account. I mean, I was driving from KwaZulu-Natal, the drought that is coming. The maize leaf is dry like I don't know what. And with that drought, there will not be food. We also don't have water, and we have not had electricity. And education is performing the way it is. In this country.
Lord.
So one of the things that we are suggesting is we have to start buying black. Because when we do that, we'll be tapping on that monopoly capital that has verticalized itself and exploited the black buying power.
But how do we do that? Are black products and services available in every sector?
When you do that, you start your own.
And where's the money going to come from?
It's not a matter of money. It's a matter of coming together and doing what is right. Because what we have followed through at the moment has yielded the result we have seen.
Coming together, does that mean for the black person, there's a need for communism? There's a need to come together as a community? Tell me, is the togetherness of the Afrikaners not a communal kind of thing? Is the AfriForum not a Xi Jinping kind of father, overseer over his nation? Aren't white people communist in their own corners? Are Indians not a closed together community? What about us black people as a community who are being divided along the clever blacks and the stupid blacks? The men are being divided along the straight and the homosexuals. Men and women are being driven away from each other thanks to accounts like Chris Excel and Shadaya. There's another guy from Zimbabwe there who is constantly blasting women who are not virgins. Why men should marry them. All sorts of things like that, you know. The drizzle movement. Men do not want to provide anymore. They want a woman who's going to bring her own money. The black man does not want to care for the black woman. The black woman has rejected the black man and said, I don't need you. And the Indians are marrying. The whites are marrying. The coloreds are also getting our issues wrong themselves. So, should black people come together? Should we be pounded in the head for saying, let's get together? Let's be a community. Should we be shamed for communism? Or is communism something else completely that white people hate for certain reasons? Why do you all hate communism? What is this labeling? Communist, 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 communist. Have you ever stopped to explain to us what's wrong with communism, 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 communism? Why is your argument communism? Communism, a pounding. Tell us what's wrong with people acting in communist ways. Tell us that you never do. Maybe that's the secret recipe that the black person is needing. The black person is being divided. The others are uniting.
From 1994 to 20, and he's left the black people in the same group. Are we going to do that for the next 30 years? Are we going to do that through the government of national unity where the policies are the same as the ones that preceded the government of national unity? This is the dilemma that we have.
Dr. Pali Lehohla, you've left us with a mic drop moment there in our studio. I would rather have 10 of these discussions than 10 breaking news items, because I feel like this is the content that moves the nation.
This is what the national dialogue should be about. When I said we should have a national dialogue before the election, it was for us to discuss these things so that when we go to vote, we vote on these issues.
A national dialogue, y'all. Ronaldo Hose, you've been called to DJ's booth to have dialogue.
We've walked out into a South Africa that's completely different than it was 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. Imagine 2 weeks later, I circle out. You know what I mean? And you're seeing it on the timeline. Like, there used to be white South Africans Twitter, and then black Twitter, and then everybody used to play in their own space, so we wouldn't engage with one another. But now, people are starting to engage. People are starting to see. Okay, people are starting to be recommended. By Pigisan. You know what I mean? People are debunking myths.
With that being said, I invited Ronaldo Hose. When that whole thing was happening last week, I DM'd him and I said, I'd like to invite you on a public debate on a podcast, yourself and Nota on race relations.
Hey yo, that's dope. Ronaldo, you've been invited. Show yourself. The opportunity has come, my brother. This is beginning, ladies and gentlemen. We need to make it possible. I don't know. I'm a weird guy. I stay home all day and I watch things such as the debates in the Oxford Union. The Oxford Union channel, they share quite a lot of debates and talks, and I am glued to that. I enjoy that kind of stuff. That's why I was asking the question, why is it in South Africa that we are trying to be divided? We are so tribal. We are so staying away from one another. And tribalism, that's what also divides us. We're not just being divided by Katlego. Tribalism, dissing each other for who we are. However, let's have some Oxford Union kind of discussions, although those are debates themselves, but it's better than staying away from each other. The Ronaldo camps there, the Katlego dividing the blacks there, the DJ Spoos there. You understand? So, I'm out of here. The video has come to an end. Like, comment, share, and subscribe.
Rather than on people who are crossing sewerage and saying we'll do this and do that without doing anything about the sewerage. Thank you very much.
Dr. Pali Lehohla, it's been a joy and a privilege to have you with us. And perhaps as Newsroom Africa, we host our own national dialogue on these issues and host people who can share substantive arguments on South Africa's future and where we need to go and how we get there. Appreciate you.
No, thank you very much.
Great to have you.
Thank you.
Let us know if you enjoy that, because we want to do more of that kind of stuff. But if you don't like it, then what do we do? So let us know that you enjoy it at Newsroom 405. Still ahead, a number of live news items.
We are out of here, ladies and gentlemen. I'll see you next time.